For the past 80 years, educators in American schools have been faced with many challenges. One of these challenges has been the debate over ability grouping. The effect that this type of grouping has on students has been debated extensively by many. Parents and teachers of the academically and intellectually gifted are often supporters of tracking and ability grouping. Critics of the practice believe that tracking does not benefit any student and only places lower-level students in a position where they are at a greater risk of failure. In this presentation, we will share with you our research on the topic by presenting the positive and negative effects of the practice.
Grouping by ability, the road to success. Education in a democracy promises that everyone will have an equal opportunity to actualize their potential, to learn as much as they can. The way to do this, to have students reach their potential and give as much as they can give, is by grouping them by ability. This is the way to success. Ability grouping is not tracking. Tracking was when a student was placed in a particular group based on the results of a particular test or a particular achievement that they had done. Once a student was in a particular track, it was very hard to get the student out of that track. It usually cornered them into the intelligent group versus the not so intelligent group for the rest of their career. This is not what ability grouping does. On the contrary, ability grouping is looking for the success of all students at all levels. When students are grouped by ability, they are placed with other students that have the same learning needs that they have. And this is done for whatever length of time works best. It is not being married to a particular track, like tracking used to be. On the contrary, each student is matched with other students of the same level and are put to work together for the success of the student. Ability grouping varies by level. High school is usually an area where more ability by grouping occurs. In elementary, we see it going on within the same classroom. Usually, it is more common in math, English, and science. When students are grouped by ability, they are not stuck in a particular track. They are not there forever. Students are reevaluated at the end of each year and are then placed into the correct group for the next year, based on what they have learned and what they have succeeded during the past school year. Grouping practices vary by schools and by state. The most common grouping practice is whole group instruction, where all of the students are in one classroom with one teacher, being taught the same curriculum and usually the same material. The other main grouping practices used when you are grouping by ability are the in-between class grouping or the Joplin plan grouping. This is a temporary grouping arrangement, and the curriculum for each class is developed according to that group's particular needs. It actually reduces heterogeneity in the classroom without affecting the self-esteem of those students that are not in the high-level track. The third grouping practice is called within-class grouping. Here, students are divided into small groups within the same classroom based on their performance and the levels of prior knowledge. And a good example of this is reading from A to C, in which students are divided into different small groups within the same classroom according to their level of reading readiness. We can see it in high school and middle school as well, within particular math classes and science classes. The students are divided into smaller learning centers through which they reach their full potential according to their ability. Ability grouping breeds success at all levels. Teachers have the opportunity to adapt their instruction to the particular level that they are teaching. And what does this mean? It means that high achievers will get more of a challenge than they were receiving in the regular classroom. They will also learn more and learn at their pace. Having other high achievers in the same group only means more of a challenge for the students in that classroom. It is very beneficial for all involved. And at the same time, it makes them realize that there are many students that are just like them. And that means that they have to keep it real. It will not let them become these elitist intellectuals. Also, it is a good thing for students that might need more academic support. If you're in a classroom that needs to review a particular area more than once, ability grouping allows for this without having anybody fall behind. When students are divided into homogeneous classrooms, we see that more learning takes place and students are more successful. Homogeneous grouping breeds success. Heterogeneous grouping can have a negative effect on both groups of students alike, the high achievers and the regular classroom. Let's listen to this example. When Bill, the gifted one, was in class, it was like the sun shining on a bright, clear day. But when he went out to work with the other gifted kids, it was like when the sun goes over the horizon. The rest of us were like the moon and the stars. That's when we finally got a chance to shine. This is what happens when you group by ability. Everybody gets their moment in the sun. Everybody gets to succeed and learn at their level. Let's remember, if the curriculum being taught to high achievers and the regular group is similar but differentiated across the board, grouping the high achieving students will breed success at all levels and will not be detrimental to the students in the regular classroom.
Imagine you were in the 4th grade and you were perhaps an advanced student. You could read something like Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time, a wonderful book on a 6th grade level. But in mixed ability classes, you're asked to go and tutor kids who may be reading on a 1st grade level and therefore teaching them the cat in the hat. Sure, it may teach you tolerance, but you are being deprived of your right to an appropriate level of education. And indeed, if we take from those with the greatest ability and only give to those with the greatest need, it is a formula for reducing everyone to the lowest common denominator, and that is not a formula for maintaining U.S. competitiveness in the world, nor of helping our best and brightest to flower and maximally live up to their potential so that they can cure our cancers, they can cure our social ills, they can be wise and responsible corporate and nonprofit leaders.
Kulik is one of the leading experts in the field of ability grouping. 9 out of his 11 studies demonstrated a higher level of overall achievement when flexible grouping arrangements took place. In homogeneous classrooms, we can see that 82% of students had a higher level of achievement at the conclusion of these studies, while 18% of the students saw no significant change at the end of the study. Homogeneous grouping and flexible grouping arrangements breed success in students of all degrees of abilities.
Grouping by achievement is a very complex and imprecise practice that we seem to have a great deal of confidence in as an efficient way to handle individual differences in learning settings. It turns out that there's very little evidence that that theory is effective in the way we practice it in school.
As previously stated, tracking and ability grouping is one of the most controversial practices in education. Once students are labeled, they typically stay in these groups for the remainder of their educational career. Grouping of students further highlights the differences among them and leads to further stratification of society. Consider these 5 points. Students in lower track classes tend to stay in lower track classes. Students in lower track courses are often given a less rigorous curriculum. Students in lower track courses are taught by less trained teachers. Tracking and ability grouping leads to social stratification, and there is little evidence to support the use of tracking and ability grouping. Students placed in lower level tracks are given the label as being low performers, and teachers often have lower expectations for these students. The effects of tracking produces slower rates of learning and causes lower levels of motivation for those students at the bottom. Because of the limited access to information, students in lower level courses do not perform as well as other students and have minimal academic gains. This chart indicates how often students are changed from a higher ability course after completing the 10th grade. The number of students who move from lower tracks to higher tracks is alarming. Many of the students in the lower tracks lack the motivation and academic independence to perform in higher tracks. The differences in high track and low track learning environments suppress the achievement of poor and minority students. According to Lovelace, many of these students study a dead-end curriculum that is educationally indefensible. Lower level students being taught by less trained teachers is another problem created by tracking. Lower level students tend to receive lower quality instruction and have considerably less access to materials and resources, and have less engaging learning and less rigorous coursework in their classrooms. These differences indicate the array of educational inequalities found in lower level classrooms. Over time, ability grouping leads to social stratification. According to Tom Lovelace, students from poor families are more likely to be assigned to low tracks than wealthier students with identical achievement scores. Children who are put into low sets in school quickly learn to view themselves as unsuccessful and develop anti-school values that lead into general antisocial behavior. Finally, one of the most striking arguments against ability grouping is that little evidence supports the claim that tracking or grouping by ability produces higher overall achievement than heterogeneous grouping. In a well-designed British study, Fogelman and Kirchhoff followed more than 9,000 students in grouped and ungrouped secondary schools for a 5-year period, finding little difference in average scores on standardized tests of math and reading achievement. This graph indicates that achievement gains are roughly equal for students in tracked and untracked schools, but the distribution of gains differs in important ways in tracked and untracked schools. High achievers learn more in a tracked system than an untracked system. Middle achievers learn about the same in tracked and untracked classes, and low achievers learn more in an untracked system than in a tracked system. There have been positive and negative effects found with regards to the practice of tracking and ability grouping. Although numerous studies have been conducted, the effects of tracking and ability grouping are still somewhat inconclusive.